Emmanuel Shields, a 34-year-old Catholic civilian from Ballinafay, South Belfast, was shot dead in his bed on the 7th of September 1990. The Ulster Freedom Fighters, the cover name used by the Ulster Defence Association, UDA, claimed responsibility for the killing. Shields was reportedly targeted by the UDA's South Belfast Brigade, led by Joe Bratty, due to previous altercations and intimidation. His family stated that he had been physically attacked by members of Bratty's unit in the past, and that they had fired shots into his mother's house when he lived with her. Shields had a criminal record, but not for Republican activity. His murder was part of a broader pattern of sectarian violence in the area during that period. The UDA's South Belfast Brigade, based in the Annadale Flats area, was responsible for several killings in the early 1990s, including the 1992 Sean Graham Bookmakers Massacre. Bratty's unit, which included figures like Raymond Elder and Stephen Inch McFerrin, was known for its brutal tactics and sectarian attacks. The killing of Emmanuel Shields was one of many during a time of heightened sectarian violence in Northern Ireland, reflecting the deep divisions and tensions that characterized the Troubles. Sonny Mooney was born in 1970 to a black father and a white Irish mother. In 1973, his mother married John Mooney, and the family relocated to Kipure Park, Finglas, in 1975, where John raised Sonny as his own child. A childhood friend recalled Sonny as the only black kid in Finglas South who briefly socialized with the local youth subculture of rude boys, fans of ska and reggae. He was remembered as a likable fella, though he eventually fell in with a problematic crowd. According to his parents, speaking to the Sunday Tribune on the 19th of May 1991, Sonny had endured racial abuse from an early age, which contributed to him becoming a resilient and capable street fighter by his late teens. Law enforcement described him as a petty criminal, noting convictions for car theft and public order offences. On 3 March 1990, his sister's boyfriend, Thomas Bulger, also known as Bullet, 20, got into a confrontation with 17-year-old Richard Groves at a local disco. Groves, who kept a horse on nearby waste ground, accused Bulger of mistreating the animal. That evening, Groves claimed Bulger head-butted him and attacked him again on his way home. Returning with a knife, Groves clashed with Bulger, who armed himself with a pole. Bulger was stabbed 5 times and later died. Groves was convicted of manslaughter and received a 5-year suspended sentence. Around September 1990, Sonny Mooney was involved in a violent fight outside a Finglas pub with Stephen Kennedy, which Mooney won. Seamus Duffy, whose sister was dating Kennedy, sought revenge against Mooney. Duffy, who worked as a bouncer in several Dublin nightclubs and fast food outlets, recruited 5 other bouncers to assist in the attack. On the evening of the 8th of October 1990, at approximately 10 p.m., 6 masked men broke into Mooney's home in Kipure Park. They beat him with pickaxe handles in front of his family, forced him into a blue Hiace van, which was later found burned, and then moved him to another vehicle. He was left severely injured at Ballymount Lane, near the junction of Ballymount Road and Greenhills Road. An anonymous call to the police around 11:30 p.m. alerted authorities, and guards found Mooney unresponsive. He died from his injuries. The attackers later claimed they had not intended to kill him. 6 men were arrested and charged with manslaughter. The murder escalated tensions locally, and it was reported in the Sunday Tribune, 19 May 1991, that one of the convicted men, David Butler, was later attacked in Mountjoy Prison by an inmate who had been friends with Sonny Mooney. William Christie, 27, from 12 Barry Drive, Finglas, was a father of 2, and was described in the media as a small-time criminal and cannabis dealer. He reportedly led a minor gang involved in robberies targeting factories and post offices, according to the Sunday Tribune, 21 October 1990. Christie had previously been arrested and charged with the murder of Brian Cheney, but was released after 4 months when the Director of Public Prosecutions dropped the case due to insufficient evidence. On the 8th of September 1990, Christie was playing as goalkeeper for Dublin United FC in a Leinster Junior League match against Parkview Celtic at the 15 acres pitch near St Mary's Hospital in Phoenix Park. After being substituted at half-time, he watched the second half from the sidelines. Around 4:30 p.m., two men approached him from behind. One, wearing a balaclava, shot Christie 4 times in the back of the head with a .38 handgun and then passed the weapon to his accomplice, who placed it in a sports bag. Both men fled on foot toward the Chapel Lizard entrance, where authorities believed their getaway car was parked. A spectator with a mobile phone called guards immediately, and Christie was rushed to Blanchardstown Hospital, where he was pronounced dead at 5:15 p.m. Early reports suggested the killing might have been revenge for Brian Cheney's murder, but this theory was quickly dismissed by authorities and the Cheney family. Two main theories emerged regarding Christie's death. One, paramilitary involvement. Some reports, including the Sunday Tribune, 21st October 1990, suggested that Christie had publicly threatened a local Republican, which may have led to his targeting by the Provisional IRA. Other sources indicated that he had Republican sympathies, leaving the IRA connection uncertain. The Irish Independent, 20 August 1992, suggested Christie had become embroiled in a dispute with associates of the IRA and may have been earmarked as a target. 2. Criminal gang involvement. The Sunday World, 30 December 1990, proposed that a professional hitman, possibly from England, was hired by a Dublin gang or major crime boss to carry out the killing. Subsequent reporting by the Sunday Tribune, 13 October 1991, and the Irish Press, 18 January 1993, suggested the involvement of a senior the Irish People's Liberation Organisation figure or a Dublin heroin dealer. No one was ever charged or convicted. After William's death, his brother Peter Christie faced legal trouble of his own. In July 1991, Peter was sentenced to 2 years in prison for his part in a house robbery in Ashbourne. On the 8th of November 1993, he was abducted from his girlfriend's home in Valeview Crescent, Finglas, by 8 men and later found severely beaten behind a Ballymun tower block. Dessie Fox, a 47-year-old bookmaker from Ireland, was killed on the 30th of September 1990 in a violent attack that remains unsolved. He had planned to attend a race meeting at the Curragh when, while driving to the venue, he was ambushed at Healy's Bridge in prosperous County Kildare. A red Toyota Carina followed him, and the occupants opened fire, damaging his vehicle. When Fox attempted to reverse, he left the road, forcing him to stop. The attackers approached and shot him through the passenger door, hitting his leg and severing a main artery. Fox died within minutes despite being rushed to Blanchardstown Hospital. Investigators believe Fox was specifically targeted because, as a bookmaker, he would often carry large sums of cash. 2 men in the stolen Carina executed the attack, one of whom discarded a Puma cap at the scene. They stole a black leather briefcase containing cash, a canvas money bag, billheads, a Motorola car phone, and car keys. Guards described the incident as a well-planned robbery, likely carried out by an organized gang from the greater Dublin area. Despite extensive investigation, no arrests were ever made. Friends and family remember Fox as a dedicated family man and a kind, modest individual. Mick Duggan, a friend and neighbor, described him as constantly busy with his work, family, and community, while deeply devoted to his wife and 3 daughters. His family has expressed ongoing grief and frustration over the unresolved nature of the case. Lorna Fox O'Mahony, his daughter, recalled the lasting impact of losing her father at age 15 and the sense of closure that remains elusive even decades later. The guards continue to treat the investigation as open, hoping that new information may eventually identify the perpetrators. The case highlights the dangers faced by bookmakers at the time, as well as the profound and lasting impact of violent crime on victims' families. Patrick McDonald, nicknamed Teasy Weezy, was a 41-year-old former member of the Irish National Liberation Army who was shot and killed on the 20th of December 1991 in Marino, Dublin. At the time, he was working in a hair salon above a bookmaker's shop on St Aidan's Park Road. A lone masked gunman entered the salon while McDonald was attending to a customer and fired 6 shots into his neck and back. Both the customer and a shop assistant were unharmed, but McDonald died instantly from the attack. McDonald had a history of involvement in paramilitary activity. During the 1970s, he was active in the INLA and had been imprisoned for armed robbery before going on the run. In the 1980s, he operated a hair salon in Castleblaney, County Monaghan, and had previously been involved in armed intimidation and car hijacking incidents. After serving most of a 10-year sentence in Portlaoise prison, he was released in 1989 and relocated to Dublin, where he resumed civilian life by running his hairdressing business. The murder of McDonald was linked to a feud between the Irish People's Liberation Organisation and a North inner-city criminal gang. Several suspects were questioned, but no charges were brought, and the killing remains unsolved. McDonald was given an Irish National Liberation Army Guard of Honour at his funeral in Newry, County Down, during which members fired a volley of shots as a final salute. Figures from Dublin's criminal underworld, including Tommy the Zombie Savage, were suspected, but no one has ever been held accountable for the murder. Michael Mick Travers, a 48-year-old Dublin man, was fatally shot on the 12th of July, 1992, in the Darndale area of Dublin. At the time, Travers was reportedly involved in a violent altercation with a member of bar staff, resulting in severe facial injuries for the staff member. Despite being advised to compensate the victim, Travers allegedly refused twice, which led to tensions escalating. According to senior guards, this refusal to make amends made Travers a target of the Provisional IRA, who were known to be active in the area during that period. On the day of the murder, Travers was ambushed and shot multiple times by assailants who had been monitoring his movements. The attack was swift and executed with precision, indicating a well-planned operation. Guards believed that Travers had been marked for death due to his failure to settle the dispute, which had drawn the attention of the Provisional IRA. The murder of Mick Travers is considered one of the many gangland killings that occurred in Dublin during the early 1990s. These incidents were often linked to internal feuds within criminal organizations and sometimes involved paramilitary groups enforcing their own form of justice. Despite investigations, the perpetrators of Travers's murder were never apprehended, and the case remains unsolved. Peter Gallagher, a 44-year-old father of 7 from Toomabridge, County Antrim, was murdered on the 24th of March 1993 in West Belfast. As he arrived for work at the Westlink Enterprise Centre on Distillery Street shortly before 8 a.m., a lone gunman approached and shot him multiple times. The Ulster Freedom Fighters, a loyalist paramilitary group, later claimed responsibility for the attack. Gallagher was a member of Sinn Féin, and his murder was part of a broader campaign of violence against nationalists in the area. The police investigation into Gallagher's murder has been widely criticised. The police ombudsman found that the RUC's handling of the case was wholly inadequate. Despite having intelligence on several individuals linked to the crime, none were arrested. Additionally, surveillance on key suspects was halted just 2 days before the murder, allowing the UFF to carry out the attack without interference. The investigation failed to identify or prosecute those responsible for Gallagher's death. Gallagher's family has long sought justice and accountability for his murder. In 2019, they launched a booklet to remember his life and to highlight the need for a new inquest into his death. The family's efforts have drawn attention to the broader issues of collusion and inadequate investigations into killings during the Troubles. Despite these efforts, no one has been convicted in relation to Peter Gallagher's murder. Michael Godfrey, aged 56, was abducted from his flat on the North Circular Road in Dublin on the night of April 3, 1993. 2 masked men forcibly entered his residence and took him away. His body was later discovered in a field near Blanchardstown, having suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head. In April 1993, PJ Judge was implicated in the murder of 56-year-old Michael Godfrey. Godfrey had recently returned to Dublin after serving prison time in Britain. The motive behind the murder was believed to be a dispute over money, highlighting Judge's ruthless approach to settling conflicts within the criminal underworld. On October 28, 1993, brothers Gerard and Rory Cairns were tragically murdered in their home in Bleary, County Armagh, Northern Ireland. The attack occurred shortly after a family celebration for their sister Roisin's 11th birthday. Gunmen from the Ulster Volunteer Force entered the house and shot both brothers in front of their sister. Roisin later recalled how one of the assailants motioned for her to remain silent before the shooting. The Cairns family has long suspected collusion between loyalist paramilitaries and state forces in the murders. In 2018, convicted UVF member Lawrence Maguire claimed that the attack was part of a broader plan to target the Cairns family, with information allegedly provided by former UVF leader Billy Wright, who had connections with the Royal Ulster Constabulary. Despite these allegations, a 2007 police ombudsman report found no direct evidence of collusion, but criticised the initial police investigation for being brief and flawed. In recent years, the Cairns family has continued to seek justice. In 2025, they welcomed the commencement of court proceedings against an individual charged with conspiring to murder Gerard and Rory Cairns. The family remains committed to uncovering the full truth behind the murders and holding those responsible accountable. Martin the General Cahill was one of Ireland's most infamous criminals, known for his daring robberies and larger-than-life persona. Born in Dublin in 1949, Cahill grew up in poverty and turned to petty crime as a teenager. Over time, he built a powerful criminal empire, orchestrating a series of high-profile heists, including the theft of gold, jewels, and priceless paintings from Russborough House. His ability to outsmart authorities and his flamboyant lifestyle made him both feared and strangely admired within Dublin's criminal underworld. By the early 1990s, Cahill had become one of the most powerful figures in organised crime in Ireland. He led a tight-knit crew and maintained an image of secrecy, rarely photographed and often taunting the guards. Despite his notoriety, Cahill lived openly in Dublin, confident in his ability to evade law enforcement. However, his growing arrogance and involvement in increasingly dangerous circles, including suspected dealings with paramilitary groups, earned him many enemies. On August 18, 1994, Cahill's reign came to a violent end. While driving his car in the Ranelagh area of South Dublin, he was ambushed and shot multiple times through the driver's window by a gunman disguised as a workman. The attacker escaped on a motorcycle, and Cahill died at the scene. The Provisional IRA later claimed responsibility for the killing, accusing Cahill of collaborating with loyalist paramilitaries and profiting from the conflict in Northern Ireland. Despite multiple investigations, no one was ever charged with his murder. Cahill's death sent shockwaves through Dublin and marked the end of an era in Irish organised crime. His killing exposed the uneasy overlap between criminal networks and paramilitary organisations during the Troubles. In the years that followed, the balance of power in Dublin's underworld shifted, and many of Cahill's associates either fled, were killed, or were absorbed into newer gangs. Michael Crinnion, age 35, was shot dead in Cork City in the early hours of the 8th of April 1995, in what guards later described as a Gangland-style execution. Crinnion, originally from the north side of Cork, was known to local detectives as a man with a history of involvement in serious crime, including armed robbery and suspected drug activity. Though not considered a major criminal figure, he was believed to have ties to both Cork and Dublin criminal networks, and his reputation on the streets suggested he had made enemies in the months leading up to his death. In the hours before the shooting, Crinnion had reportedly been socialising in a city centre pub. Witnesses recalled that he seemed agitated and left shortly after midnight. Around 1 a.m., residents in the Fairhill area of Cork were awakened by the sound of gunfire. Crinnion's body was later discovered slumped inside his car, parked on a quiet street. He had been shot multiple times at close range, suggesting that his killer, or killers, had waited for him to return home. The firearm used was believed to be a handgun, and the attack bore all the hallmarks of a professional hit. Guards quickly ruled out robbery as a motive. Investigators instead focused on Crinnion's criminal associations and possible involvement in disputes over drugs or cash. One line of inquiry suggested that he may have been targeted as part of a power struggle within Cork's small but growing drugs underworld. Others speculated that his murder might have been connected to Dublin criminals seeking to enforce a debt or settle a score. Several individuals known to Crinnion were questioned, but no one was ever charged. The murder also exposed the difficulty Gardaí faced in tackling an increasingly organised and ruthless underworld. Despite ongoing investigations and occasional public appeals for information, Michael Crinnion's murder remains unsolved. William Jock Corbally, aged 44, was a well-known figure in Dublin's fingerless criminal underworld. On 28 February 1996, he went missing after meeting with associates, sparking immediate concern among guards and the local community. Corbally was suspected of involvement in local drug and gang activity, and his disappearance was soon linked to suspicions that he may have been informing to the Garda. Investigators believe that Corbally was beaten to death with baseball bats and an iron bar by three men who accused him of being a Garda informer. The attack is thought to have been carried out with extreme brutality, reflecting the ruthless methods used within Dublin's organised crime scene to enforce discipline and punish perceived betrayal. Despite searches and inquiries, his body was never recovered, leaving the exact circumstances of his death shrouded in uncertainty. Among the suspected perpetrators was P.J. Judge, a prominent fingerless gang leader, who was himself shot dead later that year in December 1996. The involvement of high-profile gang members in Corbally's disappearance highlights the violent internal disputes and mistrust that characterized Dublin's criminal underworld in the 1990s. Garda investigated the case thoroughly, but the secretive nature of the gangland environment made it difficult to obtain evidence. Veronica Guerin, aged 37, was a prominent crime journalist in Ireland, known for her fearless reporting on Dublin's criminal underworld. On 26 June 1996, while waiting at a red light on the Naze dual carriageway in West Dublin, Guerin was shot dead by a gunman riding pillion on a motorbike. The attack was meticulously planned and executed, demonstrating the lengths to which Dublin's organised crime figures would go to silent scrutiny of their activities. Investigations revealed that Guerin's assassination had been ordered by John Gilligan, a major drug dealer from Clondalkin, whose criminal empire had been exposed repeatedly in her reporting. The gunman, Brian Meehan, aged 36, from Crumlin, was subsequently identified as the shooter. He was tried and convicted of murder by the non-jury Special Criminal Court and received a life sentence, marking one of the most high-profile prosecutions connected to Dublin's gangland murders. The murder of Guerin shocked the nation and drew international attention, highlighting the dangers faced by journalists investigating organised crime. It also exposed the scale and audacity of Dublin's drug gangs, who were willing to eliminate anyone threatening their operations. Guerin's death intensified law enforcement efforts against organised crime in Ireland and led to significant reforms in policing and criminal prosecution. Veronica Guerin's legacy endures as a symbol of courage and integrity in journalism. Her assassination galvanized public opinion against gang violence and inspired legislation aimed at dismantling criminal networks. P.J. Judge, aged 41 and widely known in the media as Psycho, was shot dead while sitting in his car in Finglas, North Dublin on the 8th of December 1996. Judge was a notorious figure in Dublin's criminal underworld, known for his involvement in armed robbery, drug dealing, and violent disputes with rival gangs. His reputation for unpredictable and aggressive behavior earned him both fear and notoriety among associates and enemies alike. On the day of the killing, Judge was parked in his car when gunmen approached and opened fire. Witnesses reported hearing several shots, after which Judge was found fatally wounded inside the vehicle. The precision and execution of the attack suggested that the killers had detailed knowledge of his routines and intended to eliminate him in a swift, targeted manner. Guards immediately treated the shooting as a professional gangland-style execution. Investigators focused on several potential motives, including disputes over drugs, criminal debts, and rivalries within Dublin's underworld. Media reports and law enforcement sources indicated that his own gang with members like Martin Marlowe Hyland were the main suspects, although no arrests or convictions were ever made. Mark Dwyer, aged 23, was abducted, tortured, and shot in the head before being dumped in a field in Finglas, North Dublin, on the 13th of December, 1996. Dwyer was reportedly involved in the Dublin drug scene and had been blamed by his associates for a missing consignment of ecstasy tablets imported from Amsterdam. His death was a brutal example of gangland enforcement within the city's criminal underworld, where disputes over drugs could quickly turn lethal. On the day of the murder, Dwyer was lured from his home and taken to a remote location in Finglas. Witnesses later described that he had been subjected to a violent assault, including torture, before being executed with a gunshot to the head. His body was then abandoned in a field, highlighting the cold and calculated nature of the attack. Guards treated the killing as a premeditated execution linked directly to criminal disputes. Investigators soon focused on individuals connected to the ecstasy consignment and the wider Finglas drug network. The investigation led to the arrest of Joseph Delaney, aged 54, who was later tried and convicted for Dwyer's murder. Delaney received a life sentence, reflecting the severity of the crime and the guards' determination to bring those responsible for gangland executions to justice. Patrick "Paddy" Farrell, aged 30, was a prominent cross-border drug dealer from Newry, known for his extensive involvement in the Irish drug trade. He operated across both the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, reportedly laundering money through legitimate businesses such as car sales while maintaining connections with various criminal networks. Farrell had a reputation as one of the country's largest drug traffickers, making him a high-profile figure in Ireland's criminal underworld during the 1990s. On the 10th of September 1997, Farrell was at the home of his girlfriend, Lorraine Farrell, in County Louth. In a shocking turn of events, Lorraine shot Paddy in the bedroom of her house. The exact circumstances surrounding why she carried out the shooting remain unclear, with speculation ranging from personal disputes to issues related to Farrell's criminal activities. Following the attack on Paddy, Lorraine turned the weapon on herself. Both were discovered dead at the scene. Farrell's death not only removed a major figure from the cross-border drug trade, but also highlighted the volatile mix of personal and professional pressures faced by people involved in organized crime. The incident prompted law enforcement to investigate possible motives, though it was difficult to separate personal conflict from potential gang-related tensions. Raymond McCord Jr., aged 24, was a young man from Newtown Abbey, County Antrim, in Northern Ireland. He became widely known in the mid-1990s, not for his own criminal activities, but because of his involvement in exposing loyalist paramilitary violence. His father, Raymond McCord Sr., had been a campaigner against the Ulster Volunteer Force following the murder of his stepson by loyalist paramilitaries, and McCord Jr.'s death would tragically echo the same cycle of sectarian and gang-related violence. On the 9th of November 1997, McCord Jr. was shot dead outside his home in Newtown Abbey. He had been targeted by members of the UVF, one of Northern Ireland's notorious loyalist paramilitary groups. Reports indicated that he had been deliberately singled out, likely due to his outspoken stance and family's activism against loyalist criminality. The killing was carried out in a brutal execution-style manner, leaving the local community shocked and fearful of further retaliatory violence. The murder of Raymond McCord Jr. highlighted the persistent influence of paramilitary groups in Northern Ireland during the late 1990s, even as the peace process was beginning to take shape. Loyalist gangs often exercised violent control over their communities, targeting those who spoke out against them, and McCord Jr.'s death underscored the risks faced by families challenging paramilitary authority. It also drew attention to ongoing concerns about the lack of accountability and the culture of intimidation that shielded such groups. Following his death, McCord Sr. intensified his campaign against the UVF and the collusion between paramilitaries and local authorities. The case became a focal point for discussions about paramilitary violence, justice, and reform in Northern Ireland. Despite investigations, no one was successfully prosecuted for the murder. Gerard Moran, aged 35, was a petty criminal operating in Dublin, known for his involvement in minor offences and local disputes. While not a major figure in the city's gangland scene, Moran's criminal connections and personal rivalries placed him in a vulnerable position within Dublin's volatile underworld. His name had occasionally appeared in Garda reports, marking him as someone involved in ongoing tensions and conflicts in the north of the city. On 21 November 1997, Moran was shot dead in Drumcondra, North Dublin. The attack appeared to be carefully executed, with the gunman targeting him in a public area, reflecting the personal nature of the dispute rather than a random act of violence. Witnesses noted the suddenness and precision of the shooting, which left Moran fatally wounded at the scene. Guards immediately launched an investigation into the killing, treating it as a premeditated act linked to personal grievances. Investigators considered former members of the Provisional IRA as potential suspects, suggesting that the murder may have been connected to long-standing local feuds or personal vendettas, rather than broader gangland rivalries. The involvement of ex-IRA figures in such killings was not uncommon in Dublin at the time, particularly when disputes required violent enforcement outside formal gang structures. Despite Garda inquiries, no arrests or convictions were ever made in Moran's case. The murder remains officially unsolved. Martin Nolan, aged 34, was a known figure in Dundalk, County Louth, with ties to local criminal activity. While not as notorious as some major Dublin gangsters, Nolan was involved in petty crime and disputes within the local underworld, which made him a target for retaliation by rival criminals. On 13 March 1998, Nolan was shot dead in Dundalk. The killing was swift and deliberate, reflecting the precision often associated with gangland-style executions. Garda treated the incident as a targeted murder, likely connected to criminal disputes rather than random violence. Witnesses reported the presence of assailants who carried out the attack with clear intent, highlighting the risks faced by those involved in organized crime. Investigators examined Nolan's local criminal associations and rivalries, exploring whether the shooting was linked to unpaid debts, personal disputes, or broader gang tensions in the Louth area. Despite inquiries and appeals for information, the investigation faced challenges due to the secretive nature of the local criminal networks. No arrests or convictions were recorded in connection with Nolan's murder. His death remains unsolved. Thomas Lockard, aged 34, was involved in criminal activity in County Louth and had connections with local underworld figures. His associations and disputes with other criminals put him at significant risk, as conflicts over money, territory, or loyalty often escalated to extreme violence in the region. On 27 April 1998, Lockard was abducted by his criminal associates. He was subjected to a brutal torture session before being stabbed to death. The severity and method of the killing indicate it was intended both as punishment and a warning to others within the criminal network. Following the murder, his body was left on a roadside, a grim display characteristic of gangland enforcement tactics. Investigators focused on Lockard's network of associates, attempting to establish motives related to disputes, debts, or betrayals within the Louth underworld. The violent nature of the killing suggested that those responsible were familiar with him and intended to make a clear statement to the criminal community. Witnesses and local intelligence provided limited information, reflecting the fear and code of silence prevalent among those involved in organized crime. No arrests or convictions were ever made in connection with Lockard's death. The murder remains unsolved. Patrick Campbell, aged 22, a member of the Irish National Liberation Army, was killed on the 6th of October 1999 in Walkinstown, South Dublin. During a violent confrontation at an industrial estate, Campbell was struck with a machete, sustaining severe injuries that caused him to bleed to death. The attack was sudden and brutal, marking a deadly escalation in ongoing disputes between paramilitary and criminal groups in the area. The incident involved a group of criminals from southwest Dublin, and it is believed the confrontation arose from a mix of personal and territorial disputes, intersecting with Campbell's paramilitary affiliations. His death underscored the volatile nature of interactions between organized crime figures and paramilitary members during this period, where even minor conflicts could quickly become lethal. In the aftermath of Campbell's death, a wave of retaliatory killings unfolded over subsequent years. Several men connected to the original confrontation or suspected of involvement were targeted in revenge attacks, illustrating the cycle of violence that often followed high-profile murders within Dublin's criminal underworld. Despite investigations and efforts to bring those responsible to justice, no arrests were ever made in connection with Campbell's killing. His death, along with the subsequent revenge attacks, reflected the deep-seated tensions and brutal methods that characterized interactions between paramilitary groups and criminal networks in late 1990s Dublin.